Von Braun's false flag alien invasion, a genuine warning or Fourth Reich deception? From 1974 to 1977, Werner Von Braun began privately telling Carol Rosin, a colleague at a major aerospace company, Fairchild Industries, about a sequence of contrived global false flag cards such as asteroid impacts and extraterrestrial invasion, which would lead to the militarization of space and usher in a new world order. Now, more than 40 years later, the sequence predicted by Von Braun appears to be on the verge of playing out as mainstream media increasingly speculate about asteroid strikes and an alien invasion in what many believe are cases of predictive programming. Given Von Braun's background as a former Nazi and the existence of a breakaway Nazi colony in South America and Antarctica in the post-World War II era, seeking to establish a Fourth Reich, a key question is whether Von Braun's warning was genuine or whether it was part of a deception by the Fourth Reich. In answering such a question, it's important to understand why Von Braun went to work with Fairchild Industries, where he learned about the planned sequence of false flag cards being discussed at boardroom meetings as described by Rosin in part 1 of this series. After NASA made the decision to end the Apollo program, Von Braun decided to retire on May 26, 1972, 6 months before the launch of Apollo 17, the last moon landing mission. He had been the director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center from 1960 to 1972, where he led the largely German engineering teams designing the Saturn V rockets that would power the Apollo program. Von Braun joined Fairchild Industries as a vice president for engineering and development. Fairchild Industries was one of the aerospace contractors that was secretly involved in building a ring-shaped Von Braun space station based on Von Braun's early designs for the US Air Force and the National Reconnaissance Office, as explained in Chapter 13 of my book, The US Air Force Secret Space Program. What is not widely known about the Apollo program is that it was used as a very effective cover for massive amounts of funding, resources and personnel covertly being transferred to Antarctica to help the expansion of a breakaway German space program hidden in underground bases. In Chapter 12 of the US Air Force Secret Space Program, I detail how the Apollo program was used as part of an agreement reached between the Eisenhower administration and the Antarctica-based German colony, also known as the Fourth Reich. Von Braun's job at NASA was to mislead the US public about the potential of rocket-propelled space travel while ensuring the German space program in Antarctica had all the resources and personnel it needed for its electromagnetically propelled spacecraft to start space colonization on the Moon, Mars, and elsewhere in our solar system. Put simply, while the Apollo program got Americans to the Moon, it got Germans to Mars and beyond. In return for its covert help through the Apollo program, the US military gained scientific assistance in its efforts to study and reverse engineer captured extraterrestrial technologies from former Nazi scientists who were brought into the US under Operation Paperclip from 1945 to 1959. Many were secretly working for the Fourth Reich, either voluntarily or were coerced to do so. Werner von Braun was among a select group of Operation Paperclip scientists who were asked to evaluate the remains of the 1947 Roswell crash for the US Army Air Force, as revealed in a leaked Majestic 12 document called the Counterintelligence Corps Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit Report. Quote, select scientists from the General Advisory Committee of the Atomic Energy Commission Most notably, Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer was interviewed at LZ-2, the second Roswell UFO crash site, as well as other members. Among paperclip specialists identified at LZ-2 were Dr. Werner Von Braun, Fort Bliss, Dr. Ernst Steinhoff, Air Material Command, Wright Field, and Dr. Hubertus Strughold, Aeromedical Lab, Randolph Field." End quote. This leaked Majestic document has an authenticity rating, quote, medium-high level of authenticity, end quote, according to a scale developed by Dr. Robert Wood and his son Ryan using a number of criteria developed for evaluating leaked government documents. What helps corroborate the document's account of the role played by Von Braun in evaluating the Roswell debris as an expert scientific consultant is a former NASA spacecraft operator, Clark McClelland, who asked Von Braun about the Roswell UFO crash. Von Braun told McClelland about the incident on the condition that no details would be revealed until after his death. Quote, Dr. Von Braun explained how he and unnamed associates had been taken to the crash site after the bulk of the military personnel had left the scene. They did a quick once-over of the site. Von Braun stated he related how the exterior of the spacecraft was not metal as we know it, but appeared to be made of something biological, like skin. And yes, there were alien bodies which were being kept in a medical tent near the UFO. The beings were small, very frail, and reptilian in nature. Von Braun compared their skin to rattlesnakes that he and his group had encountered at White Sands. Von Braun was puzzled by the nature of the debris. The material was very thin, aluminum-colored, similar to chewing gum wrapping, according to the scientist. End quote. The leaked Majestic 12 document and McClelland's recollection does show that Von Braun and other paperclip scientists were actively advising the US Army Air Force on recovered alien technologies from Roswell and other locations from July 1947. Dr. Arthur Rudolph was also a German rocket scientist that was brought into the US in Operation Paperclip. He worked at both NASA's Kennedy Space Center and Marshall Space Flight Center as the chief architect for the Saturn V engines that powered the Apollo program and as Von Braun's special assistant up to January 1969. Rudolph has been identified as working with the US Air Force in studying and reverse engineering a captured extraterrestrial spacecraft, especially after his official retirement in 1969. David Adair, who designed an electromagnetic fusion containment engine for the US Air Force in 1971, describes how Rudolph was leading a highly classified scientific effort to reverse engineer a captured extraterrestrial spacecraft stored at Area 51. Adair described how Rudolph had authority over senior Air Force officials and was being actively helped by the CIA. So, if German paperclip scientists were helping the US Air Force study and reverse engineer alien technologies, were they genuinely assisting or were they double agents sabotaging US efforts? William Bill Tompkins, a draftsman/engineer with Douglas Aircraft, TRW, and other leading aerospace companies during the 1950s to the 1970s, describes how the German paperclip scientists occupying senior corporate positions would sabotage industry efforts to build electromagnetic and torsion-filled propulsion systems. Quote, and even at Douglas and over at TRW and all those other companies, General Dynamics included, some top-level people were throwing negatives on everything that we were attempting to do. So you must ask the question, why do we have so much of this sabotage happening at such a high level in technology in the country and in the whole military? And who is telling them to try to stop everything, try to cut it down when we're trying to help ourselves? End quote. The power of a mysterious Fourth Reich over Operation Paperclip scientists, some of whom were forced to sabotage US R&D efforts, is illustrated by McClelland, who says he personally witnessed the former Nazi SS general Hans Kammler in the mid-1960s at the NASA office of Dr. Kurt Debus, head of the Kennedy Space Center. Kammler had escaped from Nazi Germany before its collapse to South America and Antarctica to help the Fourth Reich expand its underground bases there. McClelland described the powerful influence exerted over the German scientists working for NASA who feared Kammler and the shadowy Fourth Reich. Quote, "I opened his office door and saw two people I had not seen at Kennedy Space Center. He introduced me to both men. He only gave me their first names during the introduction. One was introduced to me as Siegfried and the other was introduced as Hans. Both had the look of Nazi high command officers. Today I am certain of who these two men were. I eventually learned from other German scientists that one of them was Siegfried Niemeyer. He was a very high-ranking Nazi Oberst officer in the Luftwaffe. The other man was difficult to recognize until I saw an older photo of him after he had later entered the USA. He was, in my opinion, Hans Kammler. There were rumors after World War II that Kammler had made a deal with General George Patton to turn over German top-secret technology for his support in getting Kammler into the USA. That may have actually happened. I personally believe it did happen." End quote. What emerges from the testimonies of Adair, McClelland, Tompkins, and others is that the US military-industrial complex had been successfully infiltrated by the Fourth Reich using Operation Paperclip scientists who were either forced or willingly working as double agents. While the German scientists appeared to be providing technical assistance for US rocket and other advanced aerospace programs, many were sabotaging US industry efforts to replicate the advanced aerospace technologies the Nazis had reverse engineered from extraterrestrial spacecraft. This naturally raises the question of whether Werner von Braun had truly broken free of all Nazi influences while heading the Marshall Space Flight Center and building the Saturn V rockets for the Apollo program, or whether he was a double agent. Adair's recollection of a warning given to him by von Braun about Rudolph does suggest that as the inaugural director of the Marshall Center, von Braun was being handled by Rudolph, who was the project director for the Saturn V rocket, and later von Braun's special assistant. Quote, "The thing is, von Braun warned me that if during my rocket work I should encounter a man named Dr. Arthur Rudolph, I should be extremely careful because he was so dangerous." End quote. It appears that von Braun and other German paperclip scientists were intimidated by Rudolph, an ardent Nazi, who was almost certainly recruited by Kammler as a key operative for the Fourth Reich. Rudolph's covert mission was to coerce paperclip scientists to do the bidding of the Antarctic Germans or face severe consequences. If von Braun either voluntarily or was coerced to work as a double agent for the Fourth Reich, this raises the question of what his true agenda was when he met Carol Rosin at Fairchild Industries in 1974. Was von Braun truthful to Rosin in warning her of a deep state plot to stage an alien false flag invasion to justify space weapons? Or was he attempting to sabotage US military efforts to one day bridge the defense technology gap with the German secret space program? The Apollo program took away valuable resources from scientific research and development of electromagnetic and torsion field propulsion systems, which the Germans had mastered for their Antarctica space fleet, described by various insiders as the Dark Fleet or Nachtwaffen, night weapons. Understanding von Braun's true role in the US Apollo and German Antarctic space programs is vital context for analysing his subsequent opposition to space weapons, as recalled by Rosin. Was von Braun genuinely committed to eliminating weapons in space, as he convinced Rosin during the final years of his life? Or was he a double agent secretly working for the Fourth Reich Antarctic Germans? Just as von Braun and other former Nazi scientists convinced the US Congress and the scientific community that rocket propulsion was the key to future space travel, as a distraction from the true potential of electromagnetic and torsion field propulsion systems, was von Braun sowing the seeds for handicapping a future US military space program that could one day threaten or rival the Germans' Dark Fleet / Nachtwaffen through advanced space weapons? This has been Dr. Michael Sala with exopolitics.org. I want to announce an upcoming webinar series beginning on July 11 on China's secret space program and the role played by the deep state in sponsoring China's secret development of a space program that can rival and even one day eclipse what the US Air Force / Space Force has secretly developed and deployed in space. Thank you for listening and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Aloha.